My ex-wife. Came back after 5 years of divorce, asking for a second chance. I was halfway through my morning coffee when I saw her standing outside my cafe window. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. 5 years had passed, 5 long years. But there she was, Samantha, looking as if she had stepped right out of my memories, yet somehow different. A little older, a little more guarded. She caught me staring, our eyes locked. I thought she'd walk away. Instead, she walked in. "Hello, Daniel," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I set my cup down slowly. "Samantha." She hesitated. "Can I sit?" I could have said no. Should have, maybe. But instead, I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat down, folding her hands on the table like someone preparing for a difficult conversation. "It's been a long time," she said. I leaned back. 5 years, almost to the day. Silence stretched between us. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She had walked away without looking back. She had been the one to say, "We're done." And now she was sitting in front of me like she had something to say. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I made a mistake, Daniel." I arched an eyebrow. "Which part?" She swallowed. "All of it." I let out a dry chuckle. "That's a big mistake." She looked down at her hands. "I was young, impulsive. I thought I wanted something else, and for a while I convinced myself I did. But I was wrong." I studied her. "Why now?" Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw something behind them. Fear? Guilt? Maybe both. I just needed to see you again. To explain. And maybe, if you'll let me, to make things right. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "Samantha, 5 years isn't an apology. It's a lifetime." She nodded as if she had expected that answer. But something wasn't right. I knew her too well. There was more to this. "What are you not telling me?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "I'm in trouble, Daniel." That changed everything. A past that refused to stay buried, Samantha. Glanced around the cafe as if she expected someone to be watching. I followed her gaze, but nothing seemed out of place. "Just the usual morning crowd." "What kind of trouble?" I asked. She hesitated. I can't tell you here." I sighed, tossing a few bills on the table. "Let's go." She looked relieved, but still tense. We stepped outside, and as soon as we did, I noticed the black SUV parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine running, I felt a chill creep up my spine. "You're being followed," she nodded. "Who?" I pressed. She bit her lip. "I thought I could fix it before it got this bad. I thought I had time." Time for what? She looked at me, something unreadable in her eyes. Then she said a name I hadn't heard in years. A name I thought I had left behind along with her. Marcus Vance. My stomach dropped. Marcus Vance. A man I had once helped put behind bars. A man who had sworn revenge. "Samantha." My voice was deadly calm. "What did you do?" She swallowed hard. "I took something from him." I closed my eyes for a second. "Tell me you're joking." She shook her head. I wish I was. 1,000 questions ran through my mind. What did she take? Why? And more importantly, how bad was this going to get? Before I could say another word, the SUV's door opened. A man stepped out. Sharp suit, dark sunglasses. He smiled. "Hello, Daniel." I had my answer. This was going to get very bad. The secrets. We keep Samantha and I found ourselves running before I even knew what we were running from. "We need to get out of sight," I muttered, steering her down a narrow alley. "Now tell me, what the hell did you steal from Marcus Vance?" She hesitated, then pulled something from her bag. A small, sleek USB drive. "This," she said. I stared at it. What's on it? She hesitated. Then, proof. I exhaled sharply. Proof of what? She looked me dead in the eye. That Marcus Vance never stopped, that he's still running everything from the shadows, drug smuggling, arms deals, blackmail, it's all on here. I let out a low whistle. Samantha, you just signed your death warrant. She shook her head. No, I signed his. I studied her. 5 years apart, and now here she was, dragging me back into a world I had barely escaped. So let me get this straight, I said. You came back to ask for a second chance, and you brought a crime lord's dirty secrets with you? She winced. Pretty much. I ran a hand through my hair. You really haven't changed, she smirked. You loved me for it once. I sighed. That was before you got us both killed, she nudged me playfully. Not dead yet. From the mouth of the alley, footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate. Not for long, I muttered. Samantha grabbed my hand. You in? I looked at her, at the woman who had broken my heart 5 years ago. And for some insane reason, I knew my answer before I even spoke. Let's finish this. Her lips curve. We ran, through the alley, past a row of rusted dumpsters, and into the back streets of the city. I could hear the footsteps behind us, steady, controlled. These weren't just hired thugs, these were professionals. And professionals didn't. Run, they hunted. Tell me there's a plan, I said, my breath steady despite the rush. Samantha shot me a glance. I was hoping you had one, I groaned. Of course you were. A sharp corner, a broken chain-link fence. I yanked it open, ushering her through before slipping in behind her. We crouched low behind a stack of crates in an abandoned lot, our backs pressed against the cold steel. The SUV stopped at the alley's mouth. 2 men stepped out. One was the suit from earlier, the one who had smiled like he already knew how. This would end. The other was bigger, bulkier, no expression, just a walking wall of muscle. Come out, Daniel. The suit's voice was smooth, almost friendly. You know how this goes. No need to make it messy. Samantha tensed beside me. How do they know your name? She whispered. I clenched my jaw. Because Marcus never forgets. The man adjusted his tie. You know, I'd hoped we'd never have to meet again. I hear you've been doing well. A quiet life, respectable. It'd be a shame to ruin that. I stayed silent. He sighed. All right, have it your way. He snapped his fingers. The muscle pulled out a gun. Silencer attached. Samantha grabbed my arm. We need to move. No, I whispered. We need to turn the tables. She frowned. What? I gestured to the crates. These are shipment containers. Smugglers use this place sometimes, which means... I tilted my head toward a metal barrel marked with a hazard symbol. Her eyes widened. You're insane, I grinned. You didn't say that when you married me. I grabbed a loose brick from the ground and launched it toward the barrel. The impact sent it crashing over, spilling a stream of liquid. The moment the men noticed, I flicked my lighter. Time to go! We bolted just as the flames roared to life, igniting the chemical spill and sending an explosion tearing through the crates. The men shouted, ducking back as smoke and fire filled the alley. By the time they regrouped, we were gone. No safe place. Left, we didn't stop running until we reached my apartment. Small, modest, but well kept. The kind of place where nothing ever happened. Until now. I locked the door behind us. Start talking. Samantha didn't hesitate. I got involved with someone who was working for Marcus. I didn't know at first, but by the time I found out, I was in too deep. I folded my arms. And the USB? She exhaled. He trusted me, gave me access to files. I made a copy. I thought I could sell it, disappear, but someone found out. She nodded. I was supposed to meet a buyer 2 nights ago. He never showed. The next day, I found out why. He was dead. rubbed my temples. Jesus, Samantha. I didn't know where else to go, Daniel. You're the only person I trust. I let out a humorless laugh. That's rich, considering you left me. She flinched. I regret it, okay? Every damn day. I looked at her. 5 years had passed, but she still had that fire in her eyes, that reckless, infuriating, impossible fire, and maybe that was why I knew I wasn't going to let her face this alone. I grabbed my old laptop, plugged in the USB, and started scrolling through the files. Names, transactions, offshore accounts. It was all there. Enough to burn Marcus Vance to the ground. But one file caught my eye. A name. My name. My. Blood turned to ice. Samantha. My voice was low. Dangerous. Why is my name in here? She went still. I turned the screen toward her. Explain. Now. She swallowed hard. I was going to tell you. I shot to my feet. Tell me what, Samantha? That I've been on Marcus Vance's radar this whole time? That while I was living my quiet life, he was watching me? Her eyes glistened. I didn't know until recently. But, yes, my fists clenched. Why? Her voice broke. Because of me. I stared at her. You didn't just take something, did you? My voice was eerily calm. You offered something. Tears slipped down her cheek. I had to protect you, Daniel. 5 years ago, I made a deal. I told Marcus I'd leave you if he let you go. My breath caught. She continued. That's why I left. It wasn't because I didn't love you. It was the only way to keep you safe. For a moment, I couldn't speak. She had walked away, shattered me, made me believe I wasn't enough. And all this time, she had done it to save my life. I ran a hand down my face. So what now? She wiped her tears. Now? Now we finish this. I looked at the files, at the proof that could take Marcus Vance down forever, at the woman who had once broken me, and who might now be the only one who could put me back together. Nodded. All right, let's end this, she smiled. That's my Daniel, and just like that, we were in this together, again, to be continued. The USB drive sat between us like a ticking time bomb. I had spent the last 3 hours digging through files, reading names I shouldn't know, seeing things no one was meant to see. Marcus Vance wasn't just laundering money or smuggling arms, he was running an entire underground network. Judges, politicians, cops, his reach was everywhere. And the worst part? I was in the files. There were surveillance photos of me, at my cafe, at the grocery store, in my apartment. 5 years of my life, watched from the shadows. I clenched my jaw. Why the hell was he watching me if he agreed to let me go? Samantha hesitated. Because he never intended to. I stared at her. Explain. She ran a hand through her hair, eyes dark with regret. The deal I made, it was never real. Marcus let you walk because he wanted you to. He knew you'd disappear into a quiet life, that you'd stop looking over your shoulder. And when the time was right, she swallowed. He was going to pull you back in. I exhaled slowly. So you knew this could happen? She looked away. I hoped it wouldn't. I slammed my laptop shut. Unbelievable. Daniel, you should have told me. Would you have let me go if I had? That shut me up because we both knew the answer. The call my burner phone buzzed, unknown number. I answered. Yeah, a deep chuckle. Daniel, it's been a while. My grip tightened. Marcus. Samantha stiffened across from me. You've been busy, Marcus mused. Snooping around, digging through things you shouldn't. I kept my voice steady. Cut the small talk. What do you want? A pause. Then, let's talk. Face to face. Not happening. Another chuckle. You don't have much of a choice, my friend. I heard shuffling in the background, a muffled cry. My blood ran cold. Marcus's voice turned amused. Recognize her? Samantha paled. Oh my God. I knew the voice. Julia. My heart pounded. My little sister, you son of a... Marcus tisked. Let's not get emotional, Daniel. I think we both know how this ends if you don't cooperate. I clenched my jaw. Where? He gave me an address, somewhere outside the city. Come alone, he warned, or she dies. The call ended. Samantha grabbed my arm. We need a plan. I looked at her. No, I said. We need a war. The trap? We drove in silence. The warehouse was exactly where I expected. An abandoned shipping dock by the river. One way in, one way out. Classic Marcus. Samantha checked the gun I had given her. Are you sure about this? I met her gaze. No, she smirked. That's my Daniel. We stepped inside. Julia was tied to a chair in the center of the room, bruised but conscious. I exhaled in relief. Marcus stood beside her, flanked by 2 armed men. He was older than I remembered, gray creeping into his beard. But the cold calculation in his eyes? That hadn't changed. Daniel? He greeted. Samantha. He tilted his head. You two were always a good pair. I kept my hands loose at my sides. Let her go. He smiled. You know how this works. The USB, now. I pulled it from my pocket, tossing it at his feet. There, all of it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That was almost too easy. I smirked. Yeah. Then the lights cut out. Gunfire erupted. The endgame Samantha and I moved fast. Years apart hadn't dulled our rhythm. We worked like clockwork. She took the left guard. 1 clean shot. Down. I tackled the other, disarming him with a sharp twist, a punch to the throat. He crumpled. Marcus fired wildly in the dark, cursing. I lunged, knocking the gun from his hand. You think this ends here? He hissed, struggling. I own this city. I pressed the barrel of his own gun against his temple. Not anymore. The sound of sirens filled the air. Samantha grinned. Looks like your insurance policy expired? Marcus laughed even as cops swarmed in. This won't stop anything. I leaned in. Maybe not. But you? You're done. Aftermath, it was over. Marcus Vance was in cuffs, his empire crumbling. Julia hugged me tight, shaking. You came for me. I kissed the top of her head. Always. Samantha stood beside me, watching as Marcus was loaded into a police van. I turned to her. So, she smirked. So, I hesitated. What happens now? She shrugged. Guess that depends. You still mad at me? I exhaled. Ask me in 5 years. She grinned. I'll hold you to that. I smirked. Damn her. Damn me, and damn whatever was coming next. Because, for better or worse, we weren't done. The end, 3 weeks had passed. Marcus Vance was in prison, his empire collapsing under federal indictments. The city was buzzing with headlines about the businessman who had secretly been running one of the most powerful crime syndicates in the country. Witnesses were flipping. Corrupt officials were scrambling to cover their tracks. But for me, it didn't feel like a win. Because the kind of people Marcus worked with, they didn't just disappear, and I had a feeling this wasn't over. Visitor in the night it was late when the knock came, too late for a friendly visit. I reached for the gun under my coffee table, moved to the door and checked the peephole. Samantha. I sighed, unlocking it. You could have called. She slipped inside, locking it behind her. I'm being watched. I tensed. By who? She shook her head. Not cops, not Marcus's guys either. She hesitated. This is something else. I frowned. You're sure? She pulled out a small black envelope and handed it to me. This was left at my door. I opened it. Inside was a single playing card, the King of Spades, and beneath it, a handwritten note. Marcus was just the beginning. See you soon. A chill ran down my spine. I flipped the card over. On the back, an address. A warehouse outside the city. No name, no instructions, just an unspoken invitation. Samantha crossed her arms. Well, I sighed. You really know how to keep things interesting? She smirked. That's why you loved me, remember? I shot her a look. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. She grinned. So, are we going? I exhaled. Looked at the card again. Yeah, because something told me. Whoever was pulling. The strings now? They were worse than Marcus ever was, and if we didn't stop them first, we wouldn't get a second chance. To be continued? The warehouse was in the middle of nowhere, a forgotten part of the city, where streetlights flickered and the air smelled of rust. A single black SUV was parked outside, engine off, but still warm. Someone was inside, watching. Samantha and I stayed low, moving through the shadows. This feels like a trap, she whispered. I smirked. That's because it is a trap. She shot me a look. And we're walking into it. Why exactly? I held up the playing card. Because whoever left this knows us, knows me, and I want to know why. She sighed. I hate that you're like this. You married me. Biggest mistake of my life. I grinned. That's not what you said last week. She rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. We reached a side entrance and I tested the handle. Unlocked. Definitely a trap, I muttered. Fantastic. Samantha pulled out her gun. Let's spring it. The man in the chair inside. The warehouse was empty. No crates, no workers. Just a single overhead light, casting a sharp glow onto a lone chair in the center. Someone sat there, hands bound. A man in a sharp gray suit, bruises blooming across his face. His eyes flickered up at us. Recognition hit me like a freight train. Raphael? Samantha's jaw tightened. Oh, hell. Raphael DeLuca, Marcus Vance's former right-hand man. He smirked weakly. Hello, Daniel. I stepped closer. What the hell happened to you? He chuckled, coughing. Got in the way of something bigger. Samantha's grip on her gun tightened. Bigger than Marcus? He nodded. You have no idea. A soft clap echoed through the warehouse. We turned sharply. A figure stepped out of the shadows, tall, refined, wearing an expensive three-piece suit, dark as midnight. His hair was slicked back, silver at the temples. But it was his eyes that caught me, sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of fear. He smiled. Daniel Carter. His voice was smooth, polished. It's about time we met. Samantha tensed, beside me. Who the hell are you? The man stepped closer. You can call me Mr. Black. The name sent a cold chill down my spine because I had heard of him. Whispers, rumors. The man who pulled the strings behind men like Marcus Vance. The real power. I exhaled slowly. All right, Black. You clearly wanted me here. So talk. His smile never wavered. Oh, Daniel, I don't want to talk. He nodded toward Raphael. I want to make you an offer. The devil's deal. Mr. Black circled Raphael like a predator studying prey. This man, he mused, was once useful. But he made a mistake. He underestimated you. Raphael spat blood onto the floor. Go to hell, Black chuckled. See? Still underestimating. He turned to me. But you, Daniel? You have potential. I narrowed my eyes. For what? Black clasped his hands behind his back. To take Marcus's place. Samantha's breath hitched. What? I let out a short laugh. You think I'd work for you? Black's smile never faded. You already have, in a way. You took down Marcus. You dismantled his network. And now, there's a vacuum. He leaned in slightly. Step into it, Daniel. Work with me. My pulse pounded. And if I say no? His smile faded. Then you die. A dozen red dots flickered to life on my chest. Snipers. Samantha's grip on her gun tightened. Son of a... I lifted a hand. Easy. Raphael chuckled bitterly. Now you get it. Black tilted his head. You're thinking. Good. That's why I want you. You understand the game. I exhaled slowly. And what if I have a counteroffer? Black raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I glanced at Samantha. She gave a slight nod. Then I looked back at Black, and I smiled. I don't work for people like you. His expression darkened. Pity. I moved fast, pulled my gun, shot out the overhead light. Darkness exploded through the warehouse. Then all hell broke loose. To be continued? The warehouse was in the middle of nowhere, a forgotten part of the city, where streetlights flickered and the air smelled of rust. A single black SUV was parked outside, engine off, but still warm. Someone was inside, watching. Samantha and I stayed low, moving through the shadows. This feels like a trap, she whispered. I smirked. That's because it is a trap. She shot me a look. And we're walking into it. Why exactly? I held up the playing card. Because whoever left this knows us, knows me. And I want to know why. She sighed. I hate that you're like this. You married me. Biggest mistake of my life. I grinned. That's not what you said last week. She rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. We reached a side entrance and I tested the handle. Unlocked. Definitely a trap, I muttered. Fantastic. Samantha pulled out her gun. Let's spring it. The man in the chair inside. The warehouse was empty, no crates, no workers. Just a single overhead light, casting a sharp glow onto a lone chair in the center. Someone sat there, hands bound, a man in a sharp gray suit, bruises blooming across his face. His eyes flickered up at us. Recognition hit me like a freight train. Raphael, Samantha's. Jaw tightened. Oh, hell. Raphael DeLuca, Marcus Vance's former right-hand man. He smirked weakly. Hello, Daniel. I stepped closer. What the hell happened to you? He chuckled, coughing. Got in the way of something bigger. Samantha's grip on her gun tightened. Bigger than Marcus? He nodded. You have no idea. A soft clap echoed through the warehouse. We turned sharply. A figure stepped out of the shadows, tall, refined, wearing an expensive three-piece suit, dark as midnight. His hair was slicked back, silver at the temples. But it was his eyes that caught me, sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of fear. He smiled. Daniel Carter. His voice was smooth, polished. It's about time we met. Samantha tensed, beside me. Who the hell are you? The man stepped closer. You can call me Mr. Black. The name sent a cold chill down my spine, because I had heard of him. Whispers. Rumors. The man who pulled the strings behind men like Marcus Vance. The real power. I exhaled slowly. All right, Black. You clearly wanted me here. So talk. His smile never wavered. Oh, Daniel. I don't want to talk. He nodded toward Raphael. I want to make you an offer. The devil's deal, Mr. Black circled Raphael like a predator studying prey. This man, he mused, was once useful, but he made a mistake. He underestimated you. Raphael spat blood onto the floor. Go to hell, Black chuckled. See? Still underestimating. He turned to me. But you, Daniel, you have potential. I narrowed my eyes. For what? Black clasped his hands behind his back. To take Marcus's place. Samantha's breath hitched. What? I let out a short laugh. You think I'd work for you? Black's smile never faded. You already have, in a way. You took down Marcus. You dismantled his network. And now? There's a vacuum. He leaned in slightly. Step into it, Daniel. Work with me. My pulse pounded. And if I say no? His smile faded. Then you die. A dozen red dots flickered to life on my chest. Snipers. Samantha's grip. On her gun tightened. Son of a... I lifted a hand. Easy! Raphael chuckled bitterly. Now you get it. Black tilted his head. You're thinking, good. That's why I want you. You understand the game. I exhaled slowly. And what if I have a counteroffer? Black raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I glanced at Samantha. She gave a slight nod. Then I looked back at Black, and I smiled. I don't work for people like you. His expression darkened. Pity. I moved fast, pulled my gun, shot out the overhead light. Darkness exploded through the warehouse. Then, all hell broke loose. To be continued? The motel room was silent. The kind of silence that held weight. The kind that meant we were on borrowed time. Samantha sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers tapping against her knee. Raphael leaned against the wall, rolling his sore wrists, watching me with wary eyes. And me? I held the King of Spades card between my fingers, staring at it like it held all the answers. Mr. Black wasn't just another crime boss. He was something worse. The kind of man who didn't rule with brute force. He ruled with control. Marcus Vance was the muscle. Black? He was the brain. And if we wanted to survive, we had to hit him before he made his next move. Samantha finally broke the silence. You said we're taking the whole deck. Care to explain how? I smirked. Simple. We flip the board. Raphael scoffed. You make it sound easy. It won't be. I tossed the card onto the table. But I know exactly where to start. Samantha raised an eyebrow. Where? I looked at Raphael. With him. The devil. You know Raphael De Luca had been Marcus Vance's right-hand man for years. If anyone knew how to dismantle Black's operation from the inside, it was him. But there was a problem. I didn't trust him. Samantha didn't either. I could see it in the way she watched him, her fingers resting near her gun. You expect me to help you? Raphael scoffed. After everything? I leaned against the table. You don't have a choice. He chuckled bitterly. There's always a choice. I shook my head. Not for you. Black tried to have you killed. If we walk away, you're a dead man. His jaw tightened. And if I help you? Samantha crossed her arms. Then you might live long enough to regret it. Raphael exhaled slowly. Thought it over. Then he nodded. Fine, I smirked. Good. Now tell me everything. The Spade Society, Raphael laid it all out. Black wasn't just running a criminal empire. He was at the head of an organization, a secret network known as the Spade Society Elite, hidden, operating in the shadows for decades. The King of Spades wasn't just a calling card. It was a rank, a position of power. And Mr. Black wasn't the only one. There were others, the Queen, the Jack, the Ace, all of them pulling strings in different parts of the world. Samantha swore under her breath. So we didn't just piss off one guy, we pissed off an entire syndicate. Raphael nodded grimly. You don't take down the King of Spades without starting a war. I exhaled. Then we better make the first move. Breaking the board. We didn't have an army. We didn't have money or power or connections, but we had information, and that was more dangerous than any gun. Step 1. Expose Black's operations. Step 2. Turn his allies against him. Step 3. Make sure he never sees it coming. Raphael pulled out his phone, scrolling through encrypted files. I have something. A list of Black's safe houses. If we hit them, we can cut off his resources. Samantha smirked. Now we're talking. I cracked my knuckles. Then let's start tearing down his kingdom. Because Black thought he was playing chess, but he forgot. I never play by the rules. To be continued? We had a target, one of Mr. Black's safe houses, a heavily guarded estate on the outskirts of the city. According to Raphael, it wasn't just a safe house. It was a hub, a place where Black stored money, weapons, and, most importantly, information. If we hit it hard enough, we wouldn't just hurt him, we'd send a message. The plan step 1, get inside. Step 2, grab anything useful. Documents, ledgers, encrypted drives. Step 3, burn the rest. Samantha loaded her gun, glancing at me. How many guards are we expecting? Raphael exhaled. At least a dozen. Maybe more, I smirked. Sounds fair. Raphael frowned. Fair? Are you insane? Samantha chuckled. You're new here, he sighed. I swear, you two belong in an asylum. I clapped him on the shoulder. Welcome to the team. The heist midnight. We approached the estate under the cover of darkness. High walls, security cameras, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Typical. We do this quiet, I whispered. No unnecessary noise. Samantha smirked. I make no promises. Raphael sighed. I hate this already. We scaled the outer wall, landing in the garden. A single guard patrolled near the back entrance. I moved fast. Silent. A quick chokehold. He was out before he could make a sound. Samantha glanced at me. Show off? I grinned. Jealous? She rolled her eyes and moved ahead. Inside, the estate was quiet. Too quiet. We crept through the hallways, avoiding security cameras, moving toward Black's study, where Raphael said the important files would be. Then, we heard voices. 2 men, armed, heading straight for us. Samantha pressed against the wall, gripping her gun. Raphael held his breath. I reached into my pocket, grabbed a coin and flicked it down the hall. The sound made both guards turn, just long enough for us to move. Samantha took the one on the left. I took the right. 2 quick, silent takedowns. We kept moving. The study was locked, but Raphael had a trick up his sleeve. A few seconds with his lockpick, and the door clicked open. Inside, exactly what we were looking for. Stacks of documents, hard drives, USBs, proof of Black's connections, names, accounts, offshore funds. Samantha's eyes widened. Holy shit, Raphael exhaled. This is it. This is everything. I grabbed a duffel bag. Then let's go. Samantha grinned. Not yet. She reached into her jacket, pulled out a small explosive charge. I chuckled. You brought C4? She smirked. You know me. We set the charges, grabbed the files, and slipped out the back. By the time we hit the tree line, boom! The estate lit up in flames, a message Black wouldn't ignore, and as we disappeared into the night, I knew one thing. The war had begun. Epilogue. The King's Move. Somewhere in the city, Mr. Black watched the burning estate from his penthouse window. He didn't look surprised. He simply took a sip of his whiskey and smiled. Then he turned to, his queen. A woman in a dark red dress watching with cold, calculating eyes. They think they've won, she murmured. Black chuckled. Let them think it. He turned back to the window, watching the fire rage. The game is just beginning. To be continued. We had barely escaped the burning estate when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A second later, a text came through. Nice fireworks. Let's talk. No name, no number, just a message. Samantha peered over my shoulder. Black? Raphael frowned. Or worse, I exhaled. Let's find out. The invitation. An hour later, we were at a dimly lit bar on the east side of the city. The kind of place where questions got you killed. We sat in a booth, drinks untouched, waiting. Then she walked. In, the woman from Black's penthouse, the queen. She was tall, elegant, dressed in deep red. Confidence dripped from every movement as she slid into the booth across from us. Samantha tensed. Raphael cursed under his breath. I leaned forward. You wanted to talk, she smiled. I wanted to warn you. The offer. You don't know what you've started, she said, swirling the ice in her glass. I smirked. I know exactly what I started. Her eyes locked onto mine. Then you know you can't win, Samantha scoffed. Funny I don't. Feel like we're losing. The queen sighed. You took out a pawn. Impressive, but meaningless. Black doesn't just play this game. He owns the board. I raised an eyebrow. Then why are you here? She leaned in. Because I don't like the way he plays. Silence. Raphael's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying I'm offering you a way out? She glanced at Samantha and Raphael before looking back at me. Disappear now, and I'll make... Sure Black never comes after you? Samantha chuckled darkly. Let me guess. And in return, you take over the empire? The queen's lips curled. Smart girl, I exhaled. And if we refuse? Her smile didn't fade. Then Black will bury you. The choice, I looked at Samantha, at Raphael, then back at the queen. I smirked. Tell Black to bring a shovel. She studied me for a long moment. Then she laughed, a genuine, rich laugh. I like you, Daniel. She stood, adjusting her coat. Pity. Then she walked away, disappearing into the night. Samantha sighed. Great. Now we have two enemies. Raphael groaned. I need a drink. I just sat there, staring at the melting ice in my glass. The queen had given us a choice, and I had made mine. There was no turning back now. Epilogue. The next move, Mr. Black sat in his penthouse, reading a message on his phone. The queen's update. She had given them a chance, and they had refused. He smiled. So be it. He reached for a deck of cards on his desk, pulled out one at random, the ace of spades. Then he made a call. Activate the ace. Across the city, a shadowed figure received. The order, a man with no name, no past, just a reputation and a mission. Kill Daniel Carter. To be continued. We were being hunted. I could feel it. The kind of feeling that crawls up your spine and whispers, you're not alone. We left the bar separately. Samantha first, then Raphael, then me. No obvious tails. No black SUVs lurking nearby. But that was the problem. The best killers don't follow you. They're already where you're going. The first strike. We took refuge in an abandoned loft on the west side, one of my old safe houses. No electricity, one exit, only the three of us. Raphael paced. You really had to piss her off? Samantha loaded her gun. He has a gift. I ignored them, watching the street through a cracked window. No movement, but that meant nothing. Raphael ran a hand through his hair. We don't even know who they're sending after us. I do. I turned to face them. The ace. Samantha froze. Shit. Raphael paled. No, no way. Black wouldn't. He did. Samantha cursed. If he sent the ace, we're already dead. Raphael rubbed his temples. The ace doesn't miss, doesn't fail, doesn't stop. I smirked. Then it's a good thing I don't either. The warning shot. The power cut out. The room plunged into darkness. Samantha whispered, Move! We spread out, guns up, hearts pounding. Then a single bullet. It wasn't aimed at us. It was a warning, a hole in the wall, a precise shot, no sound of a gun. Just a hole where no hole should be. Raphael whispered, He's here. Samantha gritted her teeth. We need to run. I exhaled slowly. Too late for that, because we weren't dealing with a man. We were dealing with a ghost. The ace revealed, the silence stretched. Then, a voice, smooth, calm, deadly. Daniel Carter. He was in the room. I couldn't see him, couldn't hear him move, but I could feel him. Samantha shifted, gripping her gun. "Show yourself," a chuckle. "That would ruin the fun." I clenched my jaw. "Black sent you." "No. Black unleashed me. The ace, the deadliest assassin in the Spade Society. The man who never left survivors, and he was toying with us. The escape plan, we needed a way out, but the ace had already cut the power, blocked our exits." I glanced at Samantha. "Flashbang," she nodded. Raphael paled. "You carry flashbangs?" She smirked. "Of course." She pulled the pin and tossed it. Boom! Light exploded. We moved. Bullets tore through the air. The ace fired once, twice, each shot exactly where we had been a second before. He wasn't guessing. He knew. But we were already out the door, sprinting, down the fire escape. By the time he recovered, we were gone. Epilogue. The chase begins. We didn't stop running until we hit the docks. Samantha leaned against a crate, breathing hard. That was too close. Raphael bent over. "We can't win against him," I exhaled. "Not in a fight." Samantha frowned. "Then what?" I smirked. "We don't fight him." I pulled out my phone, sent a single message to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "I need a favor, because if we couldn't kill the ace, we had to outplay him." Somewhere in the city, the ace stood in the empty loft watching the darkness. He touched the bullet hole in the wall. Then he smiled. "Let's see how good you really are, Carter. To be continued?" The phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message. It was a call. I didn't hesitate. "Hello?" A cold voice on the other end, one that sent a shiver down my spine. "Daniel Carter, we need to talk." I didn't need to ask who it was. "The ace," I said, my voice even. A pause, then a soft chuckle. "That's what they call me, yes. You're lucky you're still breathing, Daniel. But I'm not here to play games." I exhaled slowly. "Then what do you want?" "You. Alive." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "Excuse me?" "I'm giving you a chance to leave. Leave town, leave the city. Take your friends with you. You don't want this war." I glanced at Samantha, who was watching me intently, her fingers tapping the handle of her gun. "Why would you help me?" The ace's voice dropped to a low, almost regretful tone. "Because I don't want to kill you. You've got a certain respect for the game. But your friends? They're dragging you down, Daniel. Leave them. Go." I leaned back against the crate, thinking. His words were tempting, like a knife buried in honey. Leave the fight. Leave the city. Walk away. But I couldn't. Not this time. "No," I said flatly. Another long pause. Then, finally, "Then we do this the hard way." I ended the call. The setup ace. I put my phone down. The weight of the decision hit me. I had just refused an offer from the most dangerous man I'd ever faced, and in doing so, I had sealed our fate. Samantha raised an eyebrow. "That was quick. No hesitation." Raphael crossed his arms. "He offered you a way out and you rejected it?" "No way out," I said quietly. "Not for me. Not for any of us." Samantha studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I agree," Raphael cursed under his breath. "This is insane. If the ace comes after us, he will come after us." I interrupted. "But we've got one thing he doesn't." They both looked at me. "What?" Samantha asked. I grinned. "We're not alone." The outsider. There was someone I hadn't called yet. Someone who could give us the upper hand. A ghost of the underworld. An expert in information. And silence. I pulled out my phone again and dialed. A number from memory. Ring. Ring. Then, "Hello, Daniel." My heart skipped a beat. It was her, Sophia. She was the last person I expected to hear from, but she was the one person I trusted with my life in the darkest of times. "I need your help," I said quickly. There was a pause, a soft laugh on the other end. "I've been waiting for this." The plan Sophia was already in the city. Of course she was. She always was. Within the hour, she was in front of our safe house, quiet, deadly, a ghost in the night. She stepped into the room without a word, her eyes immediately taking in the situation. The tension in the air. The risk. "You're still alive?" "Good," Samantha smirked. "You're one to talk." Sophia nodded. "I don't get involved in petty games, but this? Black? The ace? This is my territory." Raphael raised an eyebrow. "You know them?" Sophia tilted her head. "Better than most. I've played this game before, Daniel. I know how to beat them." I leaned in. "So what's the move?" Sophia's smile was cold, calculating. "We go after Black's right hand." "Marcus Vance." Raphael's eyes widened. "Vance? You want to go after the muscle?" Sophia chuckled. "Vance's loyalty to Black is his greatest weakness. Break him, and you break the Spade Society." Samantha grinned. "I like where this is going." I stood up. "And Vance?" Sophia smiled, though her eyes were cold. "We'll give him a choice. Side with us or die. The choice." The next night, we tracked Marcus Vance to a high-end nightclub in the heart of the city. We had eyes everywhere. Sophia's network was vast. She knew where Vance would be, what he'd be doing. The plan was simple. Approach Vance. No weapons drawn, no intimidation. Just a conversation. As we entered the club, the bass of the music vibrated in our chests. Neon lights flickered across the room, casting eerie shadows, and there he was, Marcus Vance, tall, imposing, his presence enough to make people step aside as he walked. He sat at a VIP table surrounded by a few of Black's trusted men. Sophia led the way, her calm, calculating demeanor keeping the attention off us. I took a deep breath. We were in the lion's den. But tonight we weren't the prey. We were the hunters. To be continued. The atmosphere in the nightclub was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and cigarette smoke. The crowd pulsed to the beat of the music, unaware of the storm about to hit them. Sophia led the way, moving gracefully through the crowd, her eyes scanning every face, every movement. Her confidence was palpable. She didn't walk. She commanded the room. We approached Marcus Vance's table, and the few men around him stiffened. They recognized us. Well, they recognized me, but they didn't move. The reputation of the Carter name had spread. It was dangerous to act without permission. Marcus didn't even look up at first. He sipped from a glass of whiskey, his eyes fixed on the dance floor. Sophia stopped just short of his table, standing tall, her posture perfect. She had already made her mark. Now she was waiting for the right moment. Finally, Vance set the glass down and looked up. His eyes were cold, almost too calm. A predator waiting for a reason to strike. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Vance said in a low, gravelly voice. I stepped forward, meeting his gaze. "Not everyone gets a visit from me, Vance. Consider yourself lucky." He raised an eyebrow. "Lucky, huh?" His lips twitched into something that almost resembled a smile. "Then why are you here?" Sophia leaned in, her voice low and dangerous. "Because you have a choice to make." The proposition Vance didn't react. Immediately. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the armrest. His gaze flicked from me to Sophia and back again. "I don't take kindly to threats, Carter," he said, his tone icy. "And I certainly don't take kindly to being played." Sophia chuckled, but it wasn't a laugh that would put anyone at ease. "This isn't a threat. This is an offer, a very simple one." Vance's lips curled into a sly grin. "I'm listening." Sophia's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping lower. Join us. Side with us against Black, against the ace. You're a piece on his board, Marcus. You don't even realize it, do you? He paused, his eyes flashing with something dark. You think I'm blind? You think I haven't seen what's been happening? You've been making waves in my territory, Carter. But you haven't seen what's waiting for you on the other side. I stared him down. We're done with Black's game. You can stay, loyal to him, or you can walk away with us. Vance leaned forward now, his gaze sharpening. Walk away? You think I don't know what happens to those who try to escape Black's control? You think I don't know what happens to people like you? There was a brief silence. The tension was palpable. Then, a voice broke the quiet. They don't die, Marcus. We turned as one, following the source of the voice. Standing behind us was a figure, almost as if she had appeared out of nowhere. Her presence was enough to freeze the entire room. The Queen. She stepped into the light, her heels clicking against the floor. The moment she moved, the air seemed to shift, and the room grew still. Even Vance's eyes narrowed in recognition. What the hell are you doing here? Vance growled, standing to his feet, his large frame imposing. She smiled. Finishing what you couldn't, Vance sneered. You're wasting your time, Emily. This game is over. Black's untouchable. Emily, the Queen, didn't flinch. Instead, her smile grew wider. I think you'll find that not everything is as it seems. The trappy watched them, a growing sense of unease creeping over me. Something was happening, something I couldn't quite place. Vance was visibly rattled now, and Emily, the Queen, was in control. I didn't trust her. And I sure as hell didn't trust Black's right-hand man either. But we needed Vance to sway, to make a choice. If we played this right, it could be the start of the endgame. Emily turned toward me, her gaze sharpening with purpose. You still don't understand, do you, Daniel? Black isn't the only player on the board. He's just the most visible. There's someone above him. Someone watching? I raised an eyebrow. Who? She smirked. You'll know soon enough. Before I could respond, there was a sound from the back of the club, distant at first, but quickly growing louder. It was unmistakable. A gunshot. Then, another, and another. Chaos erupted as the club's patrons scrambled, ducking behind tables, scrambling for cover. Screams filled the air, a blur of motion. I glanced at Sophia. What the hell's going on? But she didn't answer. Her eyes were already scanning the chaos, a cold focus returning to her. Then I saw him, the ace. His face was hidden behind a black mask, his eyes cold and predatory. His movements were precise, surgical, and now he was in the club, closing in. Fast! Get down! I shouted to Samantha and Raphael, but I didn't wait for their response. I moved toward Vance, grabbing him by the arm. You're coming with us, now! He shoved me off. I'm not running from him. You don't have a choice! The battle Vance turned just in time to see the ace's figure appear through the smoke and shadows. The club's chaos continued to rage, but there, in the midst of the pandemonium, a new voice cut through the noise. Calm, assured, and lethal. Enough. The room seemed to still. Even the ace paused, his body tense as he turned toward the source of the command. A figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows in the far corner of the club. Tall, impeccably dressed, with a cold, calculating gaze, he wasn't just anyone. It was Black. I recognized him instantly, though we'd never met face-to-face before. The man who had orchestrated everything, the man who ruled the Spade Society, from the shadows. He had the look of someone who knew how to control the room without ever raising his voice. Even the ace, normally a predator in any situation, stepped back and lowered his weapon, his expression unreadable. Sophia took a slow step back, her hand drifting toward her gun. But Black didn't seem to notice. or care. He wasn't the one who needed protection. The standoff Black's eyes scanned the room, and for the first time since I had met him, I realized something. He wasn't just a puppet master. He was a king, and this was his domain. "Carter," Black said, his voice smooth and cold, like a blade sliding across silk. "I must admit I'm impressed. You've caused more damage than I ever thought possible. But you should have known. No one leaves the Spade Society. No one." I didn't flinch. "That's where you're wrong, Black. People leave all the time." He laughed, a soft, chilling sound. "Oh. And what exactly makes you think you're different?" I glanced at Sophia, who stood with a calm that mirrored my own. We were playing a dangerous game now. One wrong move, and we would all end up dead. But we weren't here to die. We were here to win. Black's eyes narrowed and his lips curled into a cold smile. "You're an interesting man, Daniel Carter. I've always respected the fight in you. But I think it's time we end this little dance of ours." Before I could respond, the ace stepped forward, his eyes locked on me. His stance was predatory. "I don't want to kill you, Carter, but I will if I have to." I turned to face him, my hand steady, the weight of the gun on my hip almost comforting now. "Funny," I said, looking at Black, then back at the ace. "I don't want to kill you either, but here we are." Black held up a hand. "Enough," he said again, his voice sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. "You've both made your choices." The ace froze, his eyes flickering with confusion. Even Sophia took a step back, her eyes narrowing. Black slowly walked toward me, his footsteps measured. "I'm not here to kill you, Daniel. Not yet." I frowned. "Then why are you here?" Black smiled, his eyes glinting with something dark. "I'm here to offer you a deal." "The deal." The words hung in the air like poison, each syllable dripping with temptation. Sophia tensed beside me, but I held my ground. Black stopped a few feet away from me, his gaze never leaving mine. "You've made your mark. You've destroyed everything I built. And yet, you're still alive. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. And that's why I'm offering you a chance to join me. Join us. Help me rebuild the Spade Society. We could be unstoppable together." I didn't say anything at first. The thought of aligning myself with the man who had nearly destroyed me and the people I cared about was revolting. But as I thought about it, I realized something. "You don't get it, do you?" I said quietly, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in your empire. I'm not interested in your power. What I want is freedom." Black's smile faltered, just for a moment. But he recovered quickly. "Freedom? What do you know about freedom? This world doesn't allow freedom. We make it. We take it. We control it. And I offer you that control. The power to make your own rules. A seat at my table. You could have it all, Daniel. The game would be yours." I shook my head slowly. "I've been playing your game for too long. I'm done." Sophia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air. "You're wasting your breath, Black. He's not going to join you." For a moment, there was silence. Then Black laughed, a deep, rich sound. "I expected as much, but I had to offer. You've made quite a name for yourself, Carter. It's a shame." The ace suddenly lunged forward. He was fast, too fast, but I was ready. In one swift movement, I drew my gun and fired. The shot echoed through the club, but it wasn't aimed at the ace. It was aimed at Black. The turning point. The bullet hit the floor just inches from Black's feet. Everyone froze. Black looked down at the bullet with amusement. "You think you can threaten me with a bullet, Daniel?" His voice was calm, unshaken. "That's adorable." But something was different now. His smile had faded, replaced with a cool calculation. The game is over, Black said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You don't control the pieces anymore. I do. The new figure stood in the doorway like a dark omen, his presence cutting through the tension in the room like a blade. The crowd, still in chaos from the earlier gunshots, seemed to pause, collectively holding its breath. Black's expression remained unchanged. But there was something different in his eyes now. A flicker of something ancient and deadly. Recognition, perhaps. The man who had just entered the club wasn't just anyone. He was someone important. Someone who could tilt the balance of power with a single move. I see you've made yourself comfortable, Black, the stranger said, his voice low and confident, like a man who knew how to command an army with just a glance. Black's smile was tight, the first sign of tension cracking his otherwise perfect composure. This is my domain, Victor. What are you doing here? The man, Victor, took a step forward, his eyes scanning the room with a coldness that made the air seem to freeze. He wasn't just walking. He was weighing everything in the room, calculating the stakes of every person's life. His every movement was deliberate, predatory, as if he had been born to command the darkness. It's funny how the world works, Victor continued, his gaze flickering to the ace, then to me. The moment you think you've won, someone always shows up to remind you that the game's not over. Not for anyone. I didn't recognize the name, but something about his tone sent a chill down my spine. Victor. Who was he? Was he some kind of rival to Black? Or was he something else entirely? Sophia, who had been silent up to this point, leaned in and whispered in my ear. Victor Malkovich, the wild card. The name clicked. Malkovich was a ghost in the criminal world, an enigma. He was said to operate outside of any major syndicate, playing both sides against each other, leaving a trail of destruction behind him. He wasn't a kingpin, but he had the resources, the connections, and the power to bring down anyone in his path. You're not welcome here, Malkovich, Black said, his voice cold. But there was something different in his tone. Fear, perhaps? The idea that someone was playing a game on his level seemed to rattle him more than he was willing to admit. Victor's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one that brought comfort. You think I care about your little empire, Black? He said, his voice dripping with contempt. I'm here for something far more interesting. Before anyone could react, Victor's eyes locked onto me. Daniel Carter. I couldn't help but feel a little unnerved as his gaze pierced through me. He had a way of looking at people that made them feel like their every move was being watched, calculated. I've been following your little war for a while now, he said, taking another step toward me. I've seen the way you move, the way you think. You're clever, I'll give you that. But you're a pawn in a game much bigger than you. I didn't flinch. I'm not interested in your games, Malkovich. But you've made a mistake. You're playing with fire. Victor chuckled, the sound dark and almost amused. Fire? He repeated, his gaze flickering to Black, then back to me. You're underestimating the situation, Daniel. You don't even realize how deep this goes. The deal rejected at that moment. Everything seemed to hang in the balance. Black and the ace were both frozen, eyes narrowed, clearly weighing the consequences of what was happening. What do you want? Black finally asked, his voice a mix of irritation and curiosity. He was clearly rattled by Victor's sudden appearance, though he tried not to show it. Victor smiled, but it was a smile that could only mean trouble. I don't want anything from you, Black. I just wanted to make sure you understood that. I am the one you should be worried about. Not Carter. Not the ace. You've been playing your little game for far too long, and it's time for a new player to take the throne. The silence in the room thickened. The tension was palpable, and, for a moment, it felt like everyone was waiting for someone to make the first move. Finally, Black broke the silence with a chilling laugh. You think you can just waltz in here and take over? You're a fool, Malkovich." But Victor didn't flinch. Instead, he simply shrugged. "Maybe. But I'd rather be a fool than a dying man." With a swift motion, he turned to face me again, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous kind of intent. "Daniel, I'm offering you a chance to get out, to leave this mess behind and step into something bigger, something far more interesting." The words hung in the air like poison, and for a moment I found myself wondering just how serious he was. Could I trust him? Could I walk away from everything and join forces with a man like Victor Malkovich? Sophia seemed to sense my hesitation and placed a hand on my arm. "Don't listen to him. He's playing you." I turned to her, my eyes meeting hers, and nodded. She was right. I couldn't afford to trust anyone in this game, not even a man like Malkovich. As we made our way out of the club, the weight of everything that had just transpired began to settle on me like a thick fog. The sense of impending danger, the unknown forces pulling strings behind the scenes. It was all starting to feel like we were caught in the center of a storm. But the problem was, we didn't know which direction the storm was coming from, and who would be left standing when it passed. We stepped into the night air, the cool breeze offering little relief from the tension that still gripped us. The city around us hummed with the usual chaos, cars honking, people shouting, the hum of the neon lights, but it felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. "You okay?" Samantha asked, her voice a bit shaky as she looked at me. I nodded, though the truth was I wasn't sure what to feel anymore. "Yeah, just trying to make sense of everything that's happening." Victor Malkovich's words echoed in my mind, his promise of a bigger game, his offer of something interesting. Was he trying to manipulate me, or was he simply telling the truth? Every move I made seemed to draw me deeper into a web I couldn't escape from. Raphael was quiet beside me, his hand resting on the gun at his side, always alert. He'd seen enough of the dark side of the world to understand how dangerous this all was, and he knew what it meant when a figure like Victor stepped onto the board. "We can't trust him," Raphael finally said, his voice low but firm. "Malkovich is as dangerous as Black, if not more so. He's playing both sides against each other, and we're caught in the middle." Sophia, ever the strategist, said nothing for a moment. Her eyes were scanning the street ahead of us, calculating each possibility. Finally, she spoke, her voice as sharp as a razor. "We need to be careful. Everyone is playing their game, and we're just pawns unless we make our own moves." I looked at her, weighing her words. She was right. We couldn't keep reacting to the people around us. It was time for us to take control of the situation, of our own lives. But how? A dark revelation. We were halfway to the car when I noticed it. An unfamiliar black SUV parked across the street. Its tinted windows gave away nothing, but I could feel someone was watching us. We weren't alone anymore. "We've got company," Samantha whispered, her hand reaching for her gun. I nodded slowly. The last thing I wanted was to get caught in a trap, especially with everything that had just happened. We had to act fast. "Stay close," I muttered, signaling for us to move toward the car. Just as we reached the vehicle, I felt the cold pressure of a gun barrel at the back of my neck. "Don't move," a voice growled, unmistakable in its authority. I froze, every muscle in my body screaming to react, but I had to keep my head cool. This was no time for a reckless move. I turned my head slightly, seeing a man in a black suit, his expression masked behind a pair of dark sunglasses. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the situation. The man didn't respond at first, just pressed the barrel of the gun harder against my neck. "You've made some dangerous enemies, Carter." Before I could respond, the SUV door opened and another figure stepped out. This one was more familiar. Black. I should have known, I muttered under my breath, the pieces clicking into place. Black had been monitoring our every move, even after the confrontation in the club. Black's cold eyes locked on mine, and he smirked. "Did you really think you could play me, Carter? You and your little gang are in way over your heads," glared at him. "It's not over until I say it is." He took a step closer, his eyes glinting with something far more dangerous than the calm persona he usually projected. "I'm offering you a chance to walk away from all this. Take it." Behind me, I could hear the others shifting, but no one moved. We were all waiting for the next play. The trap titan Sophia broke the silence. "You really think you can just control everything, Black? That you can intimidate us into submission?" His smile faded, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of real anger behind his eyes. "You think you have a choice, Sophia? You're nothing but pawns on a board. And right now, I'm the one who controls the game. I'm the one who decides who wins and who dies." I could feel the tension escalating. Every muscle in my body screamed to act, but I held my ground. "I'm not afraid of you, Black." Before Black could respond, the man holding the gun to my neck suddenly stepped back. I didn't take the chance to turn, didn't dare make a move. I needed to understand what was happening, and then the unexpected happened. "Enough." The voice was calm, but it held power, authority. Everyone froze at the sound, and for the second time that night, the entire atmosphere shifted. "I'm the one who calls the shots here." I turned sharply, my heart racing. The person who had just spoken was Emily, the queen. The air hung thick with uncertainty as we stood there, the quiet after the storm almost deafening. Emily, calm and composed, stood facing Black, her eyes sharp, her posture regal. Black, his facade of confidence shattered, was now a man backed into a corner. The rest of us were silent, watching, calculating what came next. The dark figure of the ace had been watching from the sidelines, but now she moved, stepping toward Emily. Her sharp, calculating eyes flickered to Black, then to me. It was clear she wasn't impressed by the events unfolding. "So, this is the part where we all become pawns in your game too, Emily?" the ace asked, her voice cool, like she was testing the waters. Emily didn't flinch. "Pawns? No. We're all players in this, but it's time we stopped being controlled by the likes of Black and his kind." Black, still on the defensive, sneered. "You think you can just replace me? That you can just tear down everything I've built in one night? You're all fools." But Emily didn't back down. "It's already been torn down, Black. You're just too blind to see it." There was a long pause, the tension so thick I could almost taste it. Every person present seemed to be playing their own game, silently weighing the risks, the rewards. But one thing was clear. Things had just reached a tipping point, and this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about power. A dangerous proposition. Just when it seemed like the conflict would escalate further, something unexpected happened. Victor Malkovich, the wild card, stepped out of the shadows, his sharp, unsettling presence once again pulling the attention back onto him, and I thought I was the only one who liked to stir the pot. His voice was casual, but there was an edge to it, a promise of destruction. All eyes turned toward him. "What the hell do you want now, Malkovich?" Black growled, clearly irritated by his continued intrusion. Victor smiled, though it wasn't a friendly smile. "What do I want? I'm not here for the scraps. I'm here for something bigger." The way he said it made the air grow colder, as if his words were an invitation to something dangerous. "Bigger?" Emily asked, raising an eyebrow. "You've already turned the city upside down? What more could you possibly want?" Victor didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to me, his eyes gleaming with an almost mocking amusement. "Daniel, you've been playing all the right moves, but I've been watching you. You're starting to understand how this game works. You might even be starting to win. But here's the thing." I took a cautious step forward. "What are you getting at, Malkovich?" Victor tilted his head slightly, his smile widening. "You see, Carter, in this game, There's only one real winner. And if you're smart, you'll realize that it's not Black. It's not Emily. It's not even me. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the group. It's you, the wild card's offer. The silence that followed felt oppressive. My heart began to pound, each beat a reminder that nothing in this world was ever truly free. Malkovich had just thrown down the gauntlet, and I had no idea what kind of game he was playing. "You've got my attention, Malkovich," I said slowly, my voice firm despite the pounding in my chest. "But don't think for a second I'll just fall in line." Victor laughed, the sound low and dangerous. "Fall in line? No, Daniel, I'm offering you control. The game is changing, and you're in a position to take it all. You don't need to bow to Black or Emily or anyone. You're the one who's been pulling the strings all along, whether you know it or not." I looked around at the people gathered. Emily was watching me with those piercing, calculating eyes. Black's expression was darker than ever, as if he was ready to snap at any moment. And the ace, well, she seemed to be waiting for me to make my move, though she didn't offer any guidance. "What's the catch?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. If there was one thing I'd learned over the years, it was that nothing came for free, especially in the world we were in. Victor's smile twisted into something darker. "You're no fool, Carter. You see the bigger picture now. The question is, will you step into the light? Will you accept the mantle, or will you let it slip through your fingers like so many others before you?" The choice. For the first time, I felt the weight of the decision pressing on me, hard. I had been pulled into this world unwillingly, pushed into the dark corners of a game I never asked to play. But now it felt like I had a real shot at taking control. I could take the power. I could become the player, not the pawn. But that came with consequences. So many consequences. Victor, sensing my hesitation, pushed further. "Think about it, Carter. No one else can do what you can do. You've got the mind for it, the ambition. You could lead this city, maybe even the whole underworld. If you play it right." Emily stepped forward, her gaze never leaving me. The voice was sharp, demanding attention. I turned, my instincts on high alert, every muscle in my body tensing. From the shadowy edge of the street, a figure emerged, tall, commanding, and wrapped in darkness. "Who the hell is that?" Black growled, his voice dripping with frustration. Victor Malkovich's face, usually so composed, now showed the first hint of genuine confusion. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as the figure stepped closer into the light. The newcomer was dressed in a sleek black coat, the collar turned up to hide most of their face, but their presence alone exuded authority. They were here to control the situation, and it was immediately clear they weren't someone we could ignore. "I believe you've all been playing the wrong game," the figure said in a low, smooth voice that seemed to reverberate through the air. I squinted, trying to make out any distinguishing features, but the shadows obscured most of their identity. Whoever they were clearly in charge. "And who the hell are you?" I asked, my hand still on my weapon but not yet drawing it. Something about the figure suggested that any sudden movements might be the wrong move. The figure stepped forward, and the harsh streetlights finally illuminated their face, sending a chill down my spine. It was a face I didn't recognize, but one that felt disturbingly familiar. A sharp jawline, piercing eyes, and an aura of power that was undeniable. But the most surprising thing about them was the way their presence seemed to command the very air. Like they knew the world was theirs to control. "My name is not important right now," the figure said, their eyes locking onto mine, as if measuring me. "What matters is that you've all been manipulated. The real power has always been hidden, quietly working behind the scenes, a hidden puppet master." The figure's words hit me like a punch. "Behind the scenes?" I echoed, narrowing my eyes. The newcomer smiled, almost as though they were enjoying the confusion, as though they had been waiting for this moment. "Yes, behind the scenes. All of you. Black, Emily, Malkovich, even the ace. You've all been pawns in a much larger game. A game that's been in motion long before you even knew it existed. I felt a sharp pang of realization. Everything had been leading up to this moment. All the moves, the counter moves, the secrets and revelations, the hidden games within games. It was all part of something far more complicated than I had ever imagined. Who's playing the game then? I asked, finally letting go of my skepticism and fully engaging in this twisted chess match. Who's pulling the strings? The figure stepped forward, their voice suddenly much colder. It's not about who's pulling the strings. It's about the ones who control the game. And I'm here to make sure you understand that the rules have changed. I swallowed hard. There was something unnerving about the calmness in their tone. Whoever this was, they had authority, and not just over the people in this alley, over something much larger. You're in my game now, the figure added, their eyes glinting in the streetlight, a sharp, calculating gaze that made me uneasy. The question is, will you play by my rules, or will you fall like the rest? The true mastermind Black, his frustration mounting, clenched his fists. This is madness, he spat. Who the hell are you to tell us how to play? But the figure wasn't fazed by his anger. Instead, they turned to Black, a knowing smile curling on their lips. You've always been so predictable, Black, but that's why you'll never be the true master of the game. For a brief second, Black's face contorted in rage, but he quickly regained his composure. It was clear that he wasn't used to being talked down to like this. None of us were. Emily, her gaze still steady on the newcomer, asked the question I had been dying to ask. What do you want from us? The figure's gaze lingered on Emily, and for a moment, I could almost sense that they were considering her. Then, with a voice as cold as ice, they replied, What I want is simple. I want the pieces to fall into place, and you... They looked directly at me, their eyes cutting through me like a knife. You, Daniel Carter, are the final piece. A shiver ran down my spine. My mind raced as I tried to understand what this meant. Final piece? Me? What the hell was going on? Before I could say anything, the figure raised a hand, signaling for silence. You see? They continued, their voice filled with a chilling certainty. All of you have been playing to a script. The battles between Black and Emily Malkovich's, manipulations. It's all been orchestrated by someone who knows the end game. And now, it's time for the final move. The last move. The weight of those words crushed the air around us. The end game. This wasn't just about turf wars, control, or power struggles. This was about something much more. The air seemed to crackle with electricity, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Every eye in the alley turned to me, some with disbelief, others with curiosity, but all with a sense of urgency. The figure who had brought us here stood quietly, watching my every move with a patient, almost eerie calm. I could feel the weight of their gaze, but it was not fear that gripped me. It was resolve. I had chosen. The crown was mine to take. You made the right choice, the figure said, their voice smooth and calculating. But understand this. Power is a game of control, Daniel. The moment you step into that role, you're not just holding the reins, you're holding the leash. And there are those who will come for you. I nodded, absorbing the words, but my mind was already racing ahead. What really came with this kind of power? The ability to control everything, the city, the players, the game itself. But it was more than just control. It was responsibility, too. The weight of what I had just accepted didn't fully hit me until now. Who are you? I asked the figure, my voice sharper this time. I needed to know. Everything had been orchestrated up until this point. The game, the moves, the players, whoever. was behind this had been pulling strings from the very beginning. The figure finally removed their coat, letting the shadows dissolve around them. In the soft glow of the streetlights, I could see the faint glimmer of a pendant at their neck. A symbol I recognized. It was the insignia of the Council of Shadows, a secretive and long-forgotten organization that had controlled the city's underworld for centuries, hidden behind a network of influence, manipulation, and surveillance. I stammered, unable to hide my shock. "You're one of them?" The figure, they, nodded. "I am. And for the past 5 years, I've been quietly shaping this city from behind the scenes. Every conflict, every power struggle, it was all part of a larger plan." Emily, Black, and even Victor seemed to react, their eyes flickering with suspicion and unease. None of us had seen this coming. The game we had all been playing, the stakes were higher than we'd ever imagined. The final bargain, but the revelation of the council was only the beginning. The figure stepped closer, their eyes never leaving mine. "Now, Daniel, it's your turn. You must understand the rules before you sit at the table. The power you seek comes with consequences. The crown you wear will be heavy, and there are those who will fight to take it from you. You will be tested." I swallowed hard, the gravity of their words settling in. "What do you want from me? Why me?" "You've already proven yourself. You've played the game without knowing the full rules, but now you do. You've survived, thrived even, when most would have fallen. That makes you an asset. And more importantly," they leaned in, their voice dropping to a whisper, "you're not a pawn, you're a king. But it's your move now." I felt the pieces shift inside me. The weight of my choice was beginning to fully crystallize. It wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about ruling, about shaping the game, not reacting to it. But there was something more, something darker beneath the surface. The consequences of this kind of power would be far-reaching. "And what happens to the others?" I asked, glancing around at Emily, Black, and Malkovich. I was fully aware that they were listening, waiting for me to decide whether I would claim this power alone or offer them a piece of the puzzle. The figure's eyes flicked to each of them, a cold calculation behind their gaze. "The others?" They chuckled softly, as if the answer was already known. "They can choose their fate. Emily, Black, Malkovich. Each of them has already made their choice, whether they realize it or not. They're all part of the game." I turned to Emily, my old partner. She hadn't said anything in response, but the look she gave me was unreadable. "And what about you?" I asked, my voice steady. "What's your stake in all of this? Are you just a shadow behind the throne, or do you have plans of your own?" She met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes, something more than the strategist I'd known. "I've been playing my own game, Daniel. I always have. But if you truly want the crown, I'll be there to help you take it." Her voice was calm, but there was a subtle warning hidden in her words. She would be my ally, but there were no guarantees. Victor Malkovich, who had been eerily quiet, finally spoke. His voice was smooth, his smirk wide. "I've always admired ambition, Carter. If you're really going to take the crown, you'll need someone who understands the game inside and out. I've got the connections. We can make this work." His words felt hollow, though. It was clear he was positioning himself for something bigger. No one was as trustworthy as they seemed. Not in this world. The moment of truth. The figure stepped back, watching me intently. The moment my fingers touched the cold metal of the crown, a shiver ran through me. It wasn't a physical sensation, but something deeper, as if I had just crossed a threshold. A boundary that once crossed could never be undone. The figure who had been orchestrating this moment stepped back, their eyes glinting in the dim light. "You've made your choice, Daniel. But understand this, you may hold the crown, but the crown does not simply belong to you. It owns you. It owns everything you care about, Every move you make will have consequences, and every secret you uncover will lead to new questions. I didn't respond immediately. The weight of their words pressed heavily on my mind, but I couldn't afford hesitation. The game was already in motion, and now I was the one at the center of it all. "So what now?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the chaos swirling inside me. The figure didn't smile. Their gaze remained fixed on me, intense and unwavering. "Now, you must prove yourself. There are those who will test you, not just in your power, but in your resolve. They will try to tear you down to take what's yours. Some will come with an army, others with nothing but their wits. But they will come, and you must decide how you will deal with them." I glanced at Emily, Black, and Malkovich. The silence between us was thick, each of them likely considering their own roles in this new game. No one spoke, but the tension was palpable. It was clear this wasn't just about me anymore. They were all waiting to see which path I would choose. The figure raised an eyebrow, as though reading my thoughts. "Don't mistake this as your victory, Daniel. It's only the beginning." The first move. I straightened, finally letting the crown settle in my grasp. The air around us seemed to shimmer with the weight of the decision, as if reality itself had bent under the pressure of the moment. The game was no longer abstract. It was real, and the stakes were higher than any of us had anticipated. "You've said the game is just beginning," I said, meeting the figure's gaze. "Then let's play." They nodded, their expression unreadable. "Very well. But remember, Daniel, the first move is always the most critical. Fail now, and you'll never rise again. But succeed, and the power you hold will grow beyond your wildest imagination." As they spoke, a low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. A storm was coming, not in the weather, but in the form of those who would challenge my rule. The final test had begun. "What kind of challenge?" Emily asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the undercurrent of tension beneath it. She was waiting for clarity, the same as I was. The figure didn't respond immediately. They took a moment to observe each of us, almost as if considering the depth of our involvement. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, they reached into the folds of their coat and pulled out a small, ornate map. It was old, marked with symbols I didn't recognize, a network of lines that stretched across the city like veins in a body. "This is the city's underbelly," the figure explained, unfurling the map to reveal a web of connections: power brokers, criminals, businessmen, and other influential figures who had been operating in the shadows. "You will need to secure control over these networks, Daniel. Each of these factions is vital. They hold secrets, resources, and power. Each one is a player, and they will all test you. Some will want to ally with you. Others will want to destroy you. But you can't ignore them. They will shape your reign." I studied the map carefully, but a sense of unease began to settle in. "And how do you suggest I approach them?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. It wasn't a matter of diplomacy or negotiation. It was about domination. The figure's eyes gleamed in the streetlight. "It's simple. Make them understand that you're not just a player in their game. You are the game. Your first move is to prove your strength. Expose the weaknesses of one of these factions. Show them that you're a force to be reckoned with. After that, the rest will follow." I glanced at Black, Emily, and Malkovich. Each of them had their own network of connections, each one a thread in this intricate web. If I was going to survive this, I would need them, but I couldn't afford to trust them completely. "And if I fail?" I asked, though I already knew the stakes. Failure wasn't an option. The figure's smile was thin, almost cruel. "Then the game will play you, Daniel, and in the end, there will be nothing left of you but dust." The first target I didn't need to be told twice. The decision was clear. I had to act fast, show my strength, or risk losing everything. I studied the map once more, narrowing down my options. The factions on the map were marked by their influence, from the criminal underworld to the legitimate businesses that funded much of the city's infrastructure. The tension was thick in the air as the group set its sights on the widow. Malkovich had already started making calls, reaching out to his network of informants. Emily's eyes were focused, as sharp as ever, but beneath her cool exterior, I could tell she was weighing the risks. Black, on the other hand, seemed calm, too calm. His silence spoke volumes, his mind clearly calculating, but the motives behind his stillness were as much of a mystery as ever. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. The crown was mine, but with it came a burden that weighed heavily on my shoulders. Every decision, every move I made now would ripple through the city, creating consequences that I could never take back. "We need to move fast," I said, cutting through the silence. The map of the city's criminal networks lay open in front of us, but the widow's faction was the most dangerous. She had ruled this underground empire for years with brutal precision. Taking her down was no small task, but if we were going to prove ourselves, this was the challenge to face. "Malkovich, can you get us a meeting with her?" He smiled, his dark eyes glinting with an almost sinister confidence. "Of course. I have people who can get us in. The widow might be untouchable, but she's not invincible." I turned to Black, who had been staring intently at the map, his expression unreadable. "And you? What's your play?" Black finally looked up, his gaze sharp. "I'll take care of the details. I know the players, the leverage points. If you want her, Daniel, we have to approach this methodically. There's no room for mistakes." Emily, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "This isn't just about taking her down, though. It's about sending a message. If we're going to take control, we need to make her believe we're a threat she can't ignore." Her eyes locked with mine. "If we move too quickly or too recklessly, we could have more enemies than we know what to do with." Her warning wasn't lost on me. There were no allies in this game, only players and pawns. The widow's empire had been built over years of careful planning, with a network of loyal followers who would stop at nothing to protect their queen. If we wanted to take her down, we needed to be smarter than she was. "Agreed," I said, my voice steady. "We'll do this on our terms. No mistakes." The meeting. The location of our meeting with the widow was a secret, even to us. Malkovich had arranged everything, pulling strings through his web of informants. We were led through a maze of dark alleys and nondescript buildings, finally arriving at a nondescript warehouse on the edge of the city. It was the kind of place where bad deals were made, and worse things happened. Inside, the dim light flickered, casting long shadows across the cold concrete floors. A few men stood guard near the entrance, their expressions cold and unwelcoming. They didn't look like the type who would hesitate to spill blood for their boss. But we didn't come here to fight. We came here to negotiate. We were led deeper, into the warehouse, past rows of crates and containers, until we reached a small, opulent office tucked away in the back. The door opened, and there, sitting behind an elegant mahogany desk, was the widow herself. She was a striking woman, her age hard to pin down, perhaps in her late 30s or early 40s, but her presence was timeless. Her dark eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed on us as we entered. There was no hesitation in her gaze, no fear. She was a queen in her domain, and we were just players in her game. "Well, well," the widow said, her voice smooth, almost taunting. "The new king in town. I've heard a lot about you, Daniel Carter, but you're not what I expected." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I didn't come here to make friends, the widow. I came here to make a deal." She laughed softly, the sound echoing through the room. "A deal? You come into my territory, sit at my table, and you want a deal? How bold!" Emily stood behind me, her eyes scanning the room, ever watchful. Malkovich took a step forward, his confident smirk never fading. Black remained silent, his eyes flickering. over every detail in the room, as though he could already predict the moves before they happened. The widow leaned back in her chair, studying us carefully. "So, what is it you want, Daniel? You think you can just walk in here and take my throne?" I didn't flinch. "I don't want your throne. I want your empire." For a moment, there was silence. The widow's eyes narrowed, studying me with an intensity that could cut through steel. Then, she leaned forward, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. "You think you can take it from me?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just waltz in and claim what's mine without paying the price?" I felt the weight of her words settle over the room like a storm cloud. The power she commanded was vast, and taking it wasn't going to be as simple as I had hoped. The sudden burst of movement sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. The two armed men who entered the room were more than just muscle. They were professionals, their movements quick and calculated. The moment the door slammed open, the temperature of the room shifted, and I knew in that instant that the widow had orchestrated this entire thing, this meeting, this game. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a test. The two men didn't hesitate. One pulled out a sleek black pistol, aiming it directly at me, while the other, a hulking figure, moved to stand beside the widow as if to shield her. Malkovich was the first to react, his hand going to his jacket pocket, but Black was quicker, his eyes narrowing, analyzing the situation in a fraction of a second. Emily's hand drifted toward the concealed weapon at her side, but there was a calm about her that spoke volumes. She wasn't fazed. This was a game she had played before. "This is how you want to play it?" I asked, my voice cutting through the tense silence. My hand was already instinctively moving toward my own concealed weapon, though I kept it steady, for now. The last thing I needed was to escalate things too quickly. The widow's smile was faint, almost amused. "You think you can control the game by walking in here and threatening me? Foolish." Her tone was icy, but beneath it, there was an edge of something else. Admiration, perhaps? She clearly saw me as a worthy adversary, but she was also testing me, pushing me. I glanced at Emily and Black, both of them now silently calculating their next moves. Malkovich, however, seemed content to wait, his grin only widening as if he were watching a scene unfold that he had long anticipated. "You're bold, Daniel," the widow continued, her eyes flickering over me. "But boldness is not enough. Power is not something you take in one fell swoop. It's something you earn, something you grow into piece by piece. You think you're ready to stand against me? Show me then." I could feel the weight of her words. Her challenge wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that I belonged at the top, that I could command, control, and navigate the labyrinthine politics of the city's underworld. And to do that, I needed more than just ambition. I needed to act. A game of trust in a flash. The man with the gun aimed at me shifted his position, clearly preparing to strike. The air was thick with anticipation. Someone had to make a move, and fast. I couldn't afford to hesitate. "Hold!" Emily's voice cut through the tension, calm yet commanding. Her hand was now fully visible, resting on the small of her back, a silent signal. She was not drawing the weapon, but she was positioning herself, ready for whatever came next. The widow raised a hand, signaling her men to hold. "Interesting," she said, her gaze shifting from Emily back to me. "You're willing to put your life in their hands, Daniel. Trusting them. But are you sure you should?" I felt a chill run through me at the implication of her words. She was playing the psychological game now, trying to plant seeds of doubt. The truth was, I didn't fully trust anyone, especially not Malkovich or Black, even if we were allies, for the time being. But right now, I had no choice but to rely on them. "Trust is a double-edged sword," I said, my voice steady, though the words felt heavier than I intended. "But it's a necessary risk if we're going to get what we want." The widow chuckled softly, her eyes never leaving mine. A risky bet, Daniel, but one that could pay off. With a small wave of her hand, the two armed men relaxed, though their weapons remained drawn. They had the posture of people who knew they were not in control, but were more than willing to take action if needed. The tension in the room slowly began to ease, but the stakes had just been raised higher. The widow was testing me, not just physically, but psychologically, mentally, and emotionally. This was no longer a battle of force. It was a battle of wills, and I had to prove that I could play the game at her level. You want to take control of my empire? The widow's voice was low, almost a whisper now. Then you must prove you can outplay me. You'll need more than just brute force and boldness. You'll need patience, cunning, and loyalty, qualities I don't see in you yet. But if you're willing to show me those things. Her words hung in the air, like an invitation and a warning. I met her gaze, unflinching. I'm ready. But it's not about taking your empire, widow. It's about reshaping it. And you're the first piece of the puzzle. The test begins. The widow's eyes narrowed, studying me like a predator observing its prey. I had just made a calculated move, showing that I wasn't afraid to challenge her. I wasn't looking to play by her rules. I was ready to create my own. We'll see about that, she replied, her voice colder now. But let's test your resolve. Let's see if you truly understand what it takes to control this city. The deafening crack of gunfire echoed through the room, and in an instant everything descended into chaos. The widow's men, trained and ruthless, moved with terrifying speed. Their pistols gleamed in the dim light as they aimed at us, their eyes calculating, focused on taking us down. But we had no choice but to fight back. I reacted first, without hesitation. My body moved instinctively, ducking low, drawing my weapon in one smooth motion. The first man lunged toward me, but I was faster, my shot finding its mark before he could even raise his gun. The impact was swift, but I didn't have time to savor it. I was already moving, rolling to the side as another man advanced. "Cover!" I yelled, instinctively looking for Emily. She was already in motion, her gun flashing as she dropped two more of the widow's men with deadly accuracy. The tension was unbearable, like the air before a thunderstorm. Every movement was a calculated risk, every second stretching out in what felt like eternity. Malkovich, grinning like a madman, fired from behind cover, his shots echoing through the room. He had always thrived in situations like this. Chaos was his domain. But Black was the enigma in the corner, never moving from his spot by the window. He didn't need to shoot. He was always 3 steps ahead, watching, analyzing, waiting. I glanced at him. He was watching everything with that cold, calculating expression of his. I knew he wasn't concerned with the gunfire or the bloodshed. He was waiting for something else. Something that would change the course of this battle. The widow's voice came from the shadows, cutting through the noise. You think this is a battle of bullets, Daniel? This is a war of wits. I didn't have time to answer. Another gunman charged at me, and I fired again, his body hitting the ground with a heavy thud. I could hear footsteps moving behind me. More. Men arriving. We were outnumbered, but we couldn't afford to retreat. Not now. We need to get to her, Emily shouted, darting behind a stack of crates for cover. She's the key! I nodded, my mind racing. The widow had set this trap perfectly, but she underestimated one thing: our willingness to fight back. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about taking control. Move, I ordered. We make for the back door. Stay close. The group of us moved swiftly, firing back as we retreated toward the back of the warehouse. But the widow's men were relentless. They were everywhere, closing in from every side. The air was thick with tension, and every turn we made, every step we took, felt like it might be our last. And then it happened. A shot rang out, louder than all the others, and I saw Black's body jerk violently. No! Emily screamed, but I couldn't spare a glance. We couldn't stop. Not now. We reached the back door, and as we burst through it into the alley, I felt my heart racing in my chest. "Malkovich, get the car!" I shouted. He was already on it, moving with surprising efficiency for someone who lived off chaos. We moved fast, adrenaline surging through my veins, until I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind us. "You think you can just walk away, Daniel?" The widow's voice was icy, taunting, but filled with venom. She wasn't going to let us escape that easily. I turned, expecting to see her entourage emerging from the shadows, ready to finish what they had started. But instead, I saw something far more chilling. The widow herself, stepping forward into the dim light, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She was alone. I narrowed my eyes, instinctively raising my gun. "What is this?" The widow's smile was slow, calculated, a predator enjoying her victory. "I gave you a chance to play by my rules, Daniel, but you had to push too far. Now we see who really controls this game." "I control this," I said through gritted teeth, my finger tightening around the trigger. She didn't flinch. "Do you?" In an instant, everything changed. There was a flash of movement, a figure darting from the shadows behind her, and I felt a sharp pain in my side. I gasped, my hand instinctively clutching my waist, and I looked down to see blood staining my shirt. The wound wasn't deep, but it was enough to make me stumble. "You didn't think you were the only one who could play the game, did you?" The widow taunted, her voice barely a whisper. I gritted my teeth and steadied myself, fighting the dizziness. I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. "You'll regret this," I muttered, my voice shaky but determined. "Oh, I'm counting." "On it," she replied, her eyes gleaming with that dangerous glint. "But here's the thing, Daniel. You may have the will, the ambition, but you lack one thing: trust. And in this world, trust is everything." "Trust?" I spat out, trying to move past the pain. "You think I trust you? You've been playing me from the start." The widow's smile faded slightly, but she didn't take her eyes off me. The car roared to life, its engine humming like a beast ready to pounce. Malkovich was behind the wheel, his hands steady, but his eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror as if expecting someone to follow us at any moment. Black's body had been left behind in that warehouse, a grim reminder of the price of playing in this game. The shot that had grazed me was beginning to hurt more with every breath I took, but I pushed through it. There was no room for weakness now. The city passed by in a blur as we sped down the darkened streets, the lights casting fleeting shadows on the walls of abandoned buildings. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing on me. The widow was far from finished, and neither was I. Emily was silent beside me, her eyes hard as she glanced at my wound. "You're bleeding," she said, the words as much of a statement as an observation. "You think?" I muttered, my hand still pressed against my side. It wasn't fatal, but it wasn't nothing either. I had to keep my focus, or I wouldn't. "Make it much farther." Malkovich looked at us through the rearview mirror, his grin still there, though it was a little more strained than before. "You know," he said, his voice casual despite the danger, "that was some impressive moves back. There. Didn't know you had it in you." "Cut the crap, Malkovich," I said, my teeth gritted in pain. "We're not done here yet. That was just a taste of what's coming. The widow's not going to let us walk away. Not without a fight." Emily nodded, her expression unreadable. "She'll come for us. She'll play her hand now, and it'll be worse than anything we've seen." "She's right," Malkovich added. "The widow's always a few steps ahead. You don't survive in this world without knowing how to control every angle. But you're starting to make it interesting. I like that." "I'm not here to entertain you, Malkovich," I snapped. "We need to figure out what our next move is." Malkovich's grin faded slightly, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "All right. So what's the plan?" I let out a deep breath, trying to ignore the throbbing pain in my side. My mind was racing, but I had to think quickly. "The widow is trying to test me. No, she's testing us. I paused, thinking. But we're not just going to play by her rules. We're going to turn the tables. Emily raised an eyebrow. Turn the tables? You think we can outplay her? I turned to face her, my eyes locking with hers. I'm not just thinking. I know we can. The calm before the storm, we arrived at our safe house, a run-down building, on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Malkovich parked the car in the alley, and we made our way inside, with me leading the way, though my legs felt weak from blood loss. Inside, we settled into the dimly lit room, the stale air thick with tension. The walls were covered with maps, photographs, and files, everything we needed to understand the game we were playing. Emily and Malkovich started to make sense of what was happening, analyzing the movements, the people involved. I slumped into a chair, my hand still pressed to my side as I took in the scene. It was quiet for a moment, just the sound of papers rustling and the hum of the overhead lights. Then, without warning, Emily spoke up. I've been thinking. I glanced at her, waiting for her to continue. We've been looking at this all wrong. The widow isn't the only one in control here. She pointed to a series of documents laid out on the table. She's playing a dangerous game, but she's not the only one with power. There are other players in the city, people who have stakes in this, people who could... Her words were interrupted by the sudden sound of a phone ringing. It was a soft, urgent tone, cutting through the air like a knife. We all froze, eyes locking. I knew it wasn't good news. I grabbed the phone from the table, my hand shaking as I answered. What? I barked. The voice on the other end was distorted, but I could hear the desperation in their tone. You need to move. The widow knows. She's got people everywhere. She's coming for you now. The line went dead before I could respond. The game turns dark. I stood up, adrenaline surging through me despite the pain. We don't have much time, I said, turning to Emily and Malkovich. She's found us. We need to move. Now. Malkovich's face shifted from amusement to grim seriousness. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. But damn, she's fast. She's smart, Emily replied, her eyes hardening. But we're smarter. I walked to the map on the wall, studying the routes, the players, the shadows lurking at every turn. We need to send a message to her. Show her we're not backing down. I turned back to face them. We hit her first. Malkovich raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Hit her how? I smiled darkly. We go after her inner circle. We find her weaknesses, her vulnerabilities. She'll never see it coming. Emily's gaze was steady, unwavering. And what about you? Are you sure you're ready for this? The city felt different now. The calm was unsettling, like the moments before a storm breaks. We had made our move, striking where it hurt. But as the dawn crept in, I knew the widow was watching, waiting, calculating her response. And I had no illusions. Her retaliation would be swift, merciless, and unforgiving. We spent the morning regrouping. Malkovich had set up a temporary base of operations in a nondescript building, far enough from the places we'd just hit, but close enough to stay connected to the heart of the action. Emily was already going through intel, working on her next move. She was always one step ahead, but I could see the fatigue in her eyes. This wasn't the kind of war anyone walked away from unscathed. I sat in the corner, the ache in my side reminding me that my body was still recovering, but my mind was sharp. I couldn't afford to let the wound slow me down. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. The phone rang again, cutting through the silence. This time, it was a secure line, and the voice on the other end was familiar. Almost too familiar. Daniel. I straightened, instantly recognizing the cold, clipped tone. What is it, Black? It's happening, he said, his voice more urgent than I'd ever heard it. The widow's making her move. She's not playing games anymore. She's going for the kill. I felt the tension rise in my chest. What's she planning? She's setting a trap for you, Black replied. She's going to use your weakness against you. She'll make you think you've won, and then she'll spring the noose. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to think through what Black had said. Where? It's already set up, Black answered. She's targeting your people, the ones closest to you. You need to act fast. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who? Black hesitated. Then the truth hit me like a freight train. Emily Malkovich. She's already infiltrated your inner circle. I didn't need to hear more. I slammed the phone down, adrenaline surging. Emily! I barked, and she immediately looked up from her computer, her eyes flashing with a mix of curiosity and concern. What is it? It's a setup. The widow's coming for us, again. I didn't mince words. She's targeting you, Emily, and Malkovich. She's playing us against each other. Malkovich, who had been silent until now, stood up from his seat, his face darkening. So she's making it personal. I knew this wasn't going to be just business. I turned back to the map, pointing out the key locations where we had hit. Her men, where we had forced her to make her next move. She's planning on using our people to bring us down, but we're not going to let that happen. I glared at the map, trying to think 2 steps ahead. What's the play? Emily asked, her voice steady despite the threat that loomed over us. I paused for a moment, considering all the possible outcomes. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment, but at the same time I knew I couldn't just abandon Emily or Malkovich to whatever the widow had planned. We split up, I said finally. I'll go after her. Bait her in. I know how she thinks. She'll be expecting me to go for her inner circle, so I'll give her what she wants. What do you mean? Emily asked, her brow furrowed. I'll make her think she's got me cornered, but I'm not the one she needs to be worried about. Malkovich grinned darkly. I like it. Lead her down the rabbit hole and we'll hit her where it hurts. Part 25. The Devil's Den. The hours leading up to our next move were tense, silent even. We prepared as best as we could, but there was always that lingering fear. That one mistake, that one miscalculation could be the difference between life and death. The widow had never been easy to beat, and now, with her knowing our every move, we were on the back foot. But we couldn't show it. The car ride to the location we'd chosen was quiet. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Emily sat across from me, her face unreadable, her hand gripping her weapon like it was an extension of herself. Malkovich, ever the wild card, was checking his phone with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was trying to mask his nerves, but I could tell he was just as uneasy as I was. We arrived at the location, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. It had been one of the widow's front operations before we had hit it. Now it was empty. A perfect place to make her think she had the upper hand. Stay sharp, I muttered as we moved toward the building. This is where she'll make her move. Don't trust anyone, not even me. Emily nodded, but Malkovich laughed under his breath. I don't trust anyone in this game, Daniel, least of all you. I glanced back at him, feeling the weight of his words, but I didn't let it show. We were all in this together, whether we liked it or not. The plan was simple. Draw the widow into the open, let her think she had control, and then, when she least expected it, take her down.